All right. Well, BootUp. I have finished the teacher and student report for the full data review for the 2024-25 school year. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can give a 15-minute overview. Let me go ahead and overview what this document looks like, and then I'll talk about some of the key points. I won't get into too many details. I'll just kind of direct you to where you can go to get to those details. So the first thing to notice is you might notice that this is kind of a long document. It's about 200 pages. The reason it's so long is not because the report is necessarily super long that way. It's about 30 pages, the report is itself. And the last 170 pages or so are all raw data that I've included so that you can see the teacher's quotes. It's actually formatted raw data where I've anonymized the teacher that has quoted the data in different ways. So that's what these appendixes are. If you were to go to the appendixes, you can see there's a question, there's the answer to the question from a teacher, there's how I coded that qualitatively, and there is the teacher ID. And I've done this for several different open-ended questions that we asked this year, so that if you ever want to know exactly what teacher said or how I might have coded that or which teacher said that in an anonymized way, you can access all of that data here in the report. So going back to the beginning of the report, if we look up here, I've started this with an executive summary, which we'll get to in a minute. There's 5 key sections. One is demographics. That's just telling you who it is that it makes up the data. So who are the teachers that make up the data this year? The effective PD looks at changes from pre to post and other changes that teachers report that they experienced due to their participation in BootUp in the 24-25 school year. The next section talks about what they did in the classroom. So how did teachers implement it? How often did they implement it? What were some of their successes and some of the barriers that they experienced in that process? Next section talks about the student response. So this brings in data both from the teacher survey and how teachers saw things happening with students, as well as the student assessments that were given out in several 34 different schools or classrooms throughout the course of the year. So that's what that section is about. And finally, the last section before the appendixes is an evaluation of BootUp according to the teachers. So what did they think of their BootUp experience overall? And how did they participate in that experience, and how did it help them in their classroom, as well as any recommendations that the teachers might have made in regards to what went well and what they would change or recommend that you would change in order to improve the BootUp experience. So that's the overview of this document, of the full report for this year. Let's go ahead and kind of give a little bit deeper dive into the executive summary. The summary right now is split into 3 parts: the strengths, critical gaps, as well as actionable recommendations. If you look at the strengths, 5 key areas here. There's high teacher satisfaction. When I asked teachers whether or not they would participate in BootUp again, only 4 teachers said they would not. So that's 98.4% of teachers said that they would, or that they were considering whether or not they would participate in BootUp again. The Net Promoter Score is a strong Net Promoter Score at 58%. And the average rating, if you were to look at all of the ratings that teachers gave, was an 8.8 out of 10. Significant growth in teacher confidence. If you look overall, their confidence increased about 51% on a 1 to 10 scale. That's a large effect in terms of practical effect size. I do think there's actually still room for growth there. They're still a little bit below the confidence of 7. Some of that could have to do with how much teachers actually implemented throughout the year. And that's something I'll talk about in the next section. But there are also major gains in self-efficacy for their coding. Teachers experienced significant practical gains both in their coding self-efficacy and in their teaching self-efficacy for teaching coding. And those are always good positive indicators. Teachers, they did feel better prepared. Over 80% met or exceeded their own expectations for teaching coding. And they were able to integrate coding into core subjects. On average, teachers integrated about 5 to 9 lessons throughout the course of the year. Of course, there's great variance there depending on the teacher. So that's the median to the mean, which is it's about 5 to 9. Teachers highly valued many of the program features. They love the hands-on learning and the peer collaboration. They talked about collaboration a lot and hands-on learning when they were rating the different elements of BootUp. They also talked about their increased confidence, the new tools that they gained, and they loved the student response and engagement. We do have a diverse participation amongst this group. They've got 60% of the teachers have graduate degrees, 33% of the teachers were specialists in the school, so about 2/3 of the teacher were classroom teachers and a third were specialists. You've got representation from 20 states. The vast majority are female, which is typical in terms of elementary education. And about a third of the teachers were Black or African American, and 60% or over 50% were white. And then you've got Asian and at about 13% in that group. In terms of some of the critical gaps, areas that could be improved, the instructional coach engagement, over half of the teachers reported no interaction at all with their instructional coach. So that may be something that you want to look at. Also, teachers did not feel terribly well supported this year across the board. They, as usual, felt the most support coming from BootUp. That was about a 7.6 out of 10. But every other area was below a 7. So that is an area that you may want to examine in terms of helping teachers to not feel isolated. In terms of expectations, one of the reasons so many teachers were able to meet expectations for teaching coding in the classroom is because a lot of them just didn't have any expectations. It's easy to meet an expectation when there are none. Only 31% even said that expectations came from school leadership, so that may be something that you want to look at as you talk with your partners. Teachers, they did feel less supported by their peers and families, as I was talking about. The least area of support is other teachers and students' families. In terms of inclusivity, when we asked about what teachers were doing to make sure all students were included, they talked about a bevy of different solutions, but a lot of teachers did mention that they did nothing to make coding inclusive. So this is an area that you may want to examine as well. And then there are different equity strategies that may need some different support. So that's, I know, always an area that you're working on with the teachers. That's an area that may need some continued attention. There is mixed implementation intensity. About 2/3 of teachers taught coding a little or less often. As we look at how often they actually implemented in the classroom, that speaks to the expectations aspect. And of course, as usual, time is the number one barrier that teachers mention in terms of being able to implement coding successfully in their classrooms. In terms of student scores, student attitudes, they were positive to begin with, right? And they ended in a positive light as well. But they did remain flat or decline. They didn't necessarily go up as we look across that. So that may be something to look at. That's as reported by the students themselves. And there are gender gaps that existed at the beginning of the study, and those gaps remain at the end of the study between boys and girls, both in attitudes and in their computational thinking abilities. So what does that mean? What are some recommendations? One is maybe clarify and elevate expectations as you work with teachers and principals to find consistent expectations for coding, and engage principals and school leadership in somehow reinforcing or encouraging those expectations. Instructional coaches are a key component of this program. You are at the mercy of school districts and how those are implemented, but some sort of encouraging of how that might be implemented more fully in the future. If you hear the coaches in this study, they love to be utilized as much as possible. And so the fact that a lot of teachers aren't utilizing them may be something individual to the teacher, or may have to do with the structure and the system that they're in. I don't know the answer to that, but a lot of teachers indicated that they were not using their instructional coaches at all. Those that did actually indicated participating in several different activities. So when they use their instructional coach, there's a lot of benefit that comes from that, according to those that were actually using their instructional coaches. Also, boosting teacher collaboration and support. Teachers love the collaborative aspects of BootUp. It was one of the main things they talked about in their open-ended comments when I asked about the best thing that they got out of this PD. So continue to facilitate those communities of practice and find out ways of helping teachers to collaborate. And that might also help those feelings of isolation that we see when we talk about teacher support. Continue to help teachers come up with strategies for inclusive instruction. There are actually a lot of really great strategies talked about here. In the appendix, you'll see that, where teachers gave a variety of ways that they help to make coding more instructive, or more inclusive, I apologize, well, of all students in the classroom. At the same time, there are many teachers who said that they didn't really do anything, or they just did the same thing for everybody. And finally, look to streamline lesson integration, continue to build out cross-curricular coding lessons, and continue to offer ready-made resources. Teachers love those resources. The vast majority of teachers rely on those resources to be able to start coding in their own classrooms, and they talked about those resources as some of the key things that they liked about BootUp. So continue to make those, especially as you look towards more integrated lessons. Continue to prepare resources that help teachers see how they can integrate, especially because you have such a large majority right now, a super majority of 2/3 of your teachers being classroom teachers. Those integration lessons could be really important. So that's kind of the overview in terms of what you might get out of this report, or what you might get out of the data as it's presented. As you go through, you'll see each of these sections here. I tried to make each of the pages informative as you go through, both with visuals and with a bit of narrative to explain those. And you'll see in these blue quotes throughout the document, teacher comments throughout. So those just kind of spread throughout. And then anytime we have these tables that summarize what came from the open-ended comments, you'll notice there is a link to the relevant appendix that it should go to as well. So not sure why that one jumped to the wrong appendix. I'll have to fix that. So hopefully that's helpful as you go through and you consider what are some of the things that we got out of the BootUp training this year. I'm sure you have lots of questions, and as you go through and you look at the report, feel free to email me more questions. There's a lot of data and analyses that didn't make it into here that I would love to answer questions about, but I think I was able to give a full report comprehensively of the teacher and student experience this year with BootUp. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, and continue to do the good work. Thanks.